Well, hey guys, have you ever wondered what causes skin color to change? Skin color is largely governed by the pigment melanin, which is made in the skin by a specialized cell type called the melanocyte. They make it, and there are these little structures that they put it in called melanosomes, and they're like little packets of pigment. Skin color is determined by the type of pigment that the melanocytes make, as well as the size and distribution of those little pigment packets, melanosomes. There are two main types of pigment: eumelanin, which is brown-black, and pheomelanin, which is red-yellow. And it's the ratio of eumelanin to pheomelanin that governs your skin color. Now, once melanin pigments are made in the melanocytes, they're stored in the melanosomes, and then they make their way to the keratinocytes. They're transferred there, and that pigment gets carried up to the top of the skin where you see it with your eyes. Now, of course, melanin pigment is not the sole determinant of skin tone and skin color. Other things influence it, like blood flow, inflammation, which can cause leakage of blood into the skin that breaks down, giving the skin a brownish, yellowish hue. You also have deposition of pigments from elsewhere, things that maybe you ingest, or things that you elect to introduce yourself, like tattoo ink. Now that you have some basic understanding as to how it is that skin gets color, you can begin to understand how it is that skin color changes. Let's talk about some conditions where your skin color changes. Vitiligo. Vitiligo is a condition where you lose pigment completely in patches. Why does this happen? It happens because your immune system mounts an attack against the pigment producing cell, the melanocyte. In those areas where the immune system is rebelling against the melanocytes, you are not able to make pigment. Therefore, the skin loses its color and turns bone white in those areas. This can involve just a few patches here and there, or it can involve a more widespread area. It makes it so that the melanocytes, they don't work properly in a given area of the skin. Vitiligo can also impact those melanocytes that are responsible for your hair color. And so you can lose hair color not only on your scalp, but also in your eyelashes, your eyebrows, other body sites. Then you have pityriasis alba. I have a whole video all about it. It affects people who have atopic dermatitis, aka eczema. But something about the inflammation of eczema can temporarily take away the pigment. It starts out actually as like light pink, scaly, dry patches that then turn white, and then eventually that scaliness kind of resolves. With time, once the eczema is under good control, the skin color in those areas does come back. So it's not cause for concern. Coming in at number 3 on my list of random things that cause skin color to change is something called PIPA, post-inflammatory pigmentary alteration. That sounds like a mouthful. Maybe you have already heard of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, aka dark spots left behind after something healed. But you can also have post-inflammatory hypopigmentation, aka light spots that are left behind. So you can group these two issues together. For whatever reason, inflammation in the skin can make the melanocytes want to make more pigment, or it can actually suppress pigment production. So your skin may heal with a dark mark, it may heal with a white mark. So long as the underlying inflammatory issue is under control, that skin color can go back to your normal skin tone with time. The longer the inflammatory issue has been going on, the longer it will take to get your skin color to go back to your normal skin color. So the key here is to treat the underlying issue early and make sure it is under good control. You can also develop this if you're somebody who scratches the skin a lot, or if you're someone who picks absent-mindedly, which can often happen when people are under a lot of stress. As a side note, I have a whole video on skin picking disorder. I highly suggest you check it out because I give a lot of tips there on how to stop picking your skin, because post-inflammatory pigmentary alteration is one side effect of skin picking. Number 4 is lichenification. Lichenification is actually not really a pigmentary issue, but rather skin thickening. But as the skin thickens, it appears darker. Why might the skin thicken? Anything that chronically rubs at the skin, whether that be chronic scratching, chronic picking, the skin will start to thicken in response to that. You often see this in people who have atopic dermatitis because it is a very itchy skin condition. They can't help but scratch. The scratching causes the skin to thicken and it appears dark and discolored. Now, once the underlying issue is stopped or controlled, namely the underlying cause of the friction, whether it be scratching, rubbing, once that is under control and no longer an issue, yes, the lichenification can improve and go away, and the background skin tone can return to normal. The rate at which that occurs and the likelihood of that occurring will be influenced by how long long the frictional process was going on. Because the skin is thickened in areas of lichenification, introducing steroid medicines directly into those areas with an injection can sometimes really help them out quite a bit, and also help cut down on the sensation of itch, helping you to cut down on scratching behaviors. We have newer medications that target specific arms of the immune system that can really help patients out a lot who are dealing with skin conditions that are itchy and leading to lichenification. Number 5 on this random list is one we have talked about in a lot of videos, and it is melasma. Melasma often occurs on the face, but honestly, it can really happen anywhere where you get sun exposure, brown patches with what are referred to as angulated borders. And this has to do with UV exposure upregulating pigment production, but it's also heavily influenced by hormones, especially hormones that come from birth control pills or related to being pregnant. Definitely can drive melasma. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun definitely makes melasma worse, but we have also come to learn that visible light from the sun makes melasma much worse. So in addition to all of the melasma treatments we've covered on my channel in the past, sunscreen is imperative for protecting the skin from those UV rays, but we have come to learn that sunscreens that are tinted with iron oxides may also offer some protection against the visible light that does drive melasma, especially in deeper skin tones. Speaking of sunscreen, sun damage is a major reason for skin color changes that become more obvious as we get older. Now, of course, sun damage can lead to dark spots known as solar lentigos. Basically, UV rays trigger populations of melanocytes to grow in number, make more pigment, and so you get brown spots. Those are called solar lentigos, aka sunspots. UV rays from the sun also can damage the deeper layers of the skin. This is called elastosis, and it can give the skin a yellowed appearance. Idiopathic guttate hypomelanosis. Idiopathic is medical speak for we don't know what causes it, but it seems as though it's largely influenced by a lot of sun exposure. Idiopathic guttate hypomelanosis, you get these little droplets of hypopigmentation, little white spots in areas where you've received a lot of sun exposure. The forearms, the lower legs are common areas. Check out my video on white spots on the arms and legs, I think it's called. I'll link it down below. Idiopathic guttate hypomelanosis. We go into more detail there as to what it is. Poikiloderma of Savant is another type of sun damage with a lot of characteristic color changes. You have red-brown patches, you also have white spots, and you have areas of hyperpigmentation, all mixed together. Most common on the sides of the neck, the upper chest. It's a type of chronic sun damage. And then you have more end-stage sun damage called dermatoporosis, just like osteoporosis, thinning of the bones. You have dermatoporosis, skin thinning related to cumulative sun exposure over your lifetime. Most obvious, again, on the forearms. And one manifestation of that is something called stellate pseudoscars. Basically looks like did somebody come at you with a razor blade on your forearm? You've got this white scar. No, it's just that the skin there is so fragile that it just spontaneously makes white scar tissue. Number 7 is medications. There are a ton of medications out there that actually can cause skin color changes. I have a whole video. I know I keep saying I have a whole video, but otherwise we'd be here all day reiterating some of the same things I've covered already. I have a whole video on medications that change your skin color. Can change the color to black, brown, yellow. Check that out. Common medication that a lot of you may have been prescribed at some point that can lead to discoloration in the skin, the bones, the eyes, the inside of the mouth, or really any organ system actually, is minocycline. This isn't very, very common, but it definitely occurs. It's a side effect that should be monitored for so that the medication, can be stopped or changed if any signs that this is occurring. And there are a few different ways in which minocycline can cause discoloration. The first is a blue-black discoloration in pre-existing scars. This most often is obvious in people who maybe have been taking minocycline, say for acne. If they have acne scars, the scars may start to turn blue-black. That is an adverse effect of minocycline. Doesn't happen super common, but it can. The second is a blue-gray discoloration that happens on the forearms and the shins. The third is a muddy brown discoloration that happens in sun-exposed areas. And the fourth, not so common, is a muddy brown discoloration that happens in prior scars, not related to sun exposure though. Number 8 on this random list is keratinoderma. Keratinoderma is a yellowish orange discoloration of the skin primarily in people who have been taking in a lot of beta carotene. This comes from eating a lot of yellow-orange fruits and vegetables like mango, papaya, squash, pumpkin, carrots, or dairy products, butter, cheese, milk. It also can happen secondary to an underlying medical problem where maybe you have a problem metabolizing these foods, like it can be seen in people who have hypothyroidism, some people who have liver disease, and it also can be seen in people who have diabetes. It's not dangerous. Now, if it's secondary to an underlying medical condition, that needs to be addressed. Don't be alarmed if you develop this from eating a lot of carrots. It's not harmful, it's not permanent. Once you cut back on consuming those or eat less of them, then the skin color can return to your baseline skin tone. Keratinoderma, it's going to be a yellowish orange discoloration. It tends to occur a lot on the nose, the sides of the nose, but also the palms and soles, because these compounds, these pigments, they are secreted in your sebum, so the oil, when you have a lot of oil glands around your nose, and sweat, which you have a lot of sweat glands on your palms and soles. So that's really where it's more obvious, and it's more obvious in like artificial light or after you've been sweating a lot. It's actually pretty common in babies because one of the first foods that is often introduced is like pureed carrots or squash or pumpkin, so they can develop it temporarily. It's not anything to be alarmed about, and it goes away as they grow up and start eating other things and their bodies mature. But if you're somebody who eats a lot of beta carotene rich foods, you may develop it from time to time. Again, it's not harmful. The only situation where it's worrisome is if it's related to an underlying medical condition like thyroid disease or diabetes. Number 9 is Tinea versicolor, otherwise known as pityriasis versicolor. Now, this is a very common skin condition that tends to flare up in the summer months when we're sweating a lot. It's actually related to a yeast that naturally lives on everyone's skin called Melasma, and some people are more vulnerable to this than others. It tends to be more common in tropical environments where you have a lot of humidity and sweat, and what it does is this little yeast, your body mounts a certain response to it that leads to a rash, that leads to these brownish kind of rough scaly spots that heal with white spots. So you have brown spots, white spots. Sometimes you can have some pink spots in there. It can itch, but sometimes it doesn't bother the person at all. It's often happening on like your chest, your back. It can happen on the sides of the neck. I have a whole video actually recently on signs of too much yeast, and this is one where you get a little overgrowth of that yeast. Causes this problem. So check that video out because I give tips, tricks, strategies for managing it, controlling it, and preventing recurrences. Number 10 is vitamin B12 deficiency. Vitamin B12 deficiency, a sign of B12 deficiency, is actually hyperpigmentation. Most common on the backs of the hands, the backs of the feet, like especially over the knuckles, but also on the palms, especially in the creases. That's definitely a sign of B12 deficiency, which is nothing to play around with. Inadequate intake is one cause, but you also have pernicious anemia and a variety of other underlying medical conditions that can lead to B12 deficiency. Check out my video on skin signs of B12 deficiency. We go over a lot more of them in that one, as well as causes and the like. So check that one out. Anything that goes wrong in your skin, you can either blame genetics or your hormones. Hormones is actually a pretty broad category. There are tons of different hormones, but one hormonal condition that can cause your skin to change color is something called Addison's disease. Addison's disease is a hormone disease that specifically is a problem with a part of your adrenal gland called the adrenal cortex, where you can't make the hormones aldosterone or cortisol. Aldosterone is essential for controlling the salt and fluid balance in your body, so it's what's responsible for like your blood pressure and fluid balance. And then, of course, cortisol is a stress hormone that is vital for pretty much every function in your body. So it's a serious disease. Most cases these days are caused by an autoimmune issue, but historically, tuberculosis is a major cause of Addison's disease. It makes their skin turn tan. They look inappropriately tan. Like, have you been using the tanning bed but they also develop a lot of hyperpigmentation in the skin folds, any areas where they have a lot of like skin friction, a lot of pressure. Addison's disease is life-threatening. You can imagine if you don't make the hormones necessary to control your blood volume, you know, that's obviously serious. If you don't make cortisol, you know, that's life-threatening. So they have to be on exogenous hormones for life to control that. So yeah, that's a skin sign of an underlying hormone disease that can be life-threatening. Addison's disease in women oftentimes also will lose androgen-dependent hair growth, namely they'll start losing underarm hair and pubic hair. All right, number 12, I need you guys to chime in the comments if you have this, because it's actually very common. It's called confluent and reticulated papillomatosis. These little brown spots that merge together into larger patches. It happens on like the chest, the back, the neck, under the arms. And you know, if you go on Google will tell you, the internet will tell you that this is rare. Rare is relative because in dermatology, it's very, very common. I've seen so many cases of carp in my life. It's a very easy thing to recognize for most dermatologists. It's actually probably a lot more common than is reported. In fact, you know, if you went into a room and had everybody take off their shirt, I guarantee you would find a lot of cases of carp. They're probably just not diagnosed. Carp can also easily be misdiagnosed as Tinea versicolor. They look similar, but in contrast to Tinea versicolor, carp is not likely related to Malassezia yeast, but rather a little bacteria, Tinea papillomatosis. For whatever reason, this bacteria causes certain populations of skin cells to divide too much or proliferate, and so you get this pattern of dark patches. And this skin condition is not dangerous. It's not contagious, even though a bacteria seems to be responsible for it. And it's not harmful. It doesn't tend to cause symptoms, but it bothers people cosmetically. The treatment for it is a course of oral antibiotics, typically minocycline. And the minocycline can clear it up, but a lot of times it comes back. And in many cases, it will eventually burn out and go away on its own, but some people deal with it on an ongoing basis. For patients who struggle with it persisting and recurring for years and years and years, it does become a bit of a balance because one of the most effective treatments, like I said, is a course of oral antibiotics. Minocycline most commonly, but also some other types of antibiotics. But antibiotics, you know, they're not without harm. They put you at risk for you know, digestive problems with your gut microbiome. They can have side effects, one of which we've already talked about in this video, minocycline hyperpigmentation. So it becomes a balance of exposing you to the risks of the medication versus like this condition, which is, you know, sometimes just not going to be cured by the antibiotic courses. The antibiotic courses kind of clear it up temporarily, and sometimes it'll just burn out, but a lot of times it comes back. So it becomes a, you know, an individualized pursuit. Some cases actually can improve with a course of Accutane, and other people get good results actually with topical retinoids, tazarotene. But if you have a large surface area of carp, that's not really practical. All right, y'all, so just right there, those are 12 random causes of skin color change. By no means is this an exhaustive list. So if you've got skin color change, I don't want you to view this as the end-all be-all list and feel like, oh, I must have one of these 12 things. There are so many other skin conditions where you have skin color changes out there. We have barely just skimmed the surface. This is just a random mishmash that I pulled together for educational purposes only. And, you know, to illustrate to you guys how complex skin is, and hopefully to help you further understand that when it comes to skin issues, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And the skincare industry, you know, it's sitting right there at the tip of the iceberg with things that target dark spots. But as you can see, lurking beneath the surface, there are so many different types of dark spots, each with their own treatment path, cause, etc., some of which go away on their own. So always keep that in mind, and keep that in mind when somebody is touting the benefits they receive from a given skin product. May not be because they have the same issue that you do, and it may look similar, but it may be totally different. You know, here in this video, you saw 2 examples of skin discoloration one caused by yeast and one caused by a bacteria. Both of them look very similar. Treatments are going to be entirely different. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Now on the end slate, I'm going to put my recent video on how skin works, where we go over more about the different layers of the skin to give you a better understanding of skin biology, so you know some of these terms like epidermis, dermis, keratinocyte, differentiation. That way you are better equipped to understand a big organ system, your skin. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.